The studio lights burn brighter than usual, reflecting off the polished table as a silence falls that no one expected. Not here, not on The View. The cameras are rolling, the audience is smiling, until suddenly everything shifts. Ben Affleck leans forward, his jaw tight, eyes locked across the table at Whoopi Goldberg. And in that single moment, you can feel it. This isn't going to be a normal interview. Before we dive into what happens next, make sure you subscribe to Talk Battles, hit that like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to witness is something no one in that studio was prepared for. It starts calmly, almost too calmly. Whoopi sits in her usual position, composed, seasoned, carrying decades of experience, from her Oscar-winning performance in Ghost to becoming one of the few EGOT winners in history. Her voice is steady, familiar, the kind that has guided countless conversations over the years. She smiles, glancing at Ben with a tone that feels welcoming, but curious. "Ben, it's good to have you back," she says, her voice smooth measured. "You've had quite the journey from Good Will Hunting to Argo, and now everything in between. But I think people are still trying to understand you." Ben exhales slowly. It's subtle, but noticeable. The kind of breath someone takes when they're preparing themselves, not relaxing. "Yeah," he replies, nodding slightly. "It's been a long road." The audience chuckles softly. Everything feels normal. Safe. But then Whoopi tilts her head just slightly. Her tone doesn't change, but her words do. "You've been very open recently about your struggles, your past, your relationships. Some people admire that. Others," she pauses, letting the silence stretch just enough, "feel like it's become part of your image. Almost strategic." The word hangs in the air like a spark. Ben's expression tightens barely. But the shift is there. His fingers tap once against the table. Not nervous. Controlled. Strategic. That's not a word he takes lightly. For a split second, he looks away, like he's choosing his response carefully. And in that moment, flashes of his past seem to echo behind his eyes. The young writer, sitting beside Matt Damon, winning an Oscar for Good Will Hunting. The director standing tall as Argo wins Best Picture. The headlines. The scrutiny. The very public highs, and even more public lows. He looks back at Whoopi. "I don't think there's anything strategic about struggling," he says, his voice calm, but firmer now. The audience shifts. Some nod. Some glance at each other. Whoopi doesn't back down. She's done this too long. She's seen every kind of guest, every kind of answer. "Of course," she replies, leaning slightly forward, her tone still composed but sharper now. "But when you share it publicly, when it becomes part of interviews, documentaries, press tours, people are going to question the intention. That's just the reality. There it is. Not an attack, but not neutral either." Ben's jaw clenches slightly. This time, it's impossible to miss. "You think I'm doing it for attention?" he asks, not loudly, but directly. A ripple moves through the audience. You can feel the temperature in the room change. Whoopi raises an eyebrow, her expression calm but unwavering. "I think," she says carefully, "that when you're in the public eye, everything you do has impact. And sometimes, whether you mean to or not, it becomes part of the narrative you benefit from." Benefit from. That's the word that lands. Ben lets out a short, almost disbelieving laugh, but there's no humor in it. "Benefit?" he repeats, leaning forward now, mirroring her posture. "You think addiction, you think personal failure. You think putting your worst moments out there is a benefit?" The audience goes completely still. Even the co-hosts shift uncomfortably. This isn't light conversation anymore. This is something else. Whoopi doesn't interrupt. She watches him, calm, observant, the way she always does when a moment starts to turn. And Ben continues, his voice steady but carrying something deeper now, something heavier. "I've spent years trying to get my life together," he says. "Years. Not for headlines. Not for some image. But because I have kids. Because I have a life outside of this industry." There's a pause. You can hear it, the sincerity, the frustration, but also the edge. Whoopi nods slowly. "And that's important," she says. "No one's denying that. But when you choose to talk about it publicly, you're also shaping how people see you. That's part of being a public figure." Ben shakes his head slightly. Not in anger, yet, but in disbelief. "No," he says quietly. "That's part of how people choose to interpret it. That's not why I do it." The tension tightens like a wire pulled too far. A few audience members exchange glances. Someone shifts in their seat. The energy in the room is no longer comfortable. It's electric. And then, Whoopi asks the question. The one that changes everything. So why do it, Ben? She says, her voice softer now, but more direct than ever. Why share it all, if not to shape that narrative? Silence. Not the kind of silence that fills space. The kind that demands something. Ben leans back slightly, his eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in focus. Like he's reached a line he didn't expect to cross today. And when he speaks again, his voice is different. Lower. Sharper. More personal. Because pretending it didn't happen nearly destroyed me, he says. The words land hard. The audience doesn't react, not yet. They're listening too closely. And I'm not going to sit here, he continues, his gaze locked on Whoopi now, and have it framed like it's some kind of calculated move. It's not a storyline. It's my life. There it is. The shift. What started as an interview is now a confrontation. And you can feel it. This is only the beginning. Because Whoopi Goldberg doesn't back down easily. And Ben Affleck isn't finished speaking. The cameras keep rolling. The audience holds its breath. And somewhere between truth, perception, and emotion, the moment is about to explode. The silence doesn't break, it stretches. You can feel it pressing in from every corner of the studio, wrapping around the table, settling between Ben Affleck and Whoopi Goldberg like something alive, something waiting. A producer shifts behind the cameras. One of the co-hosts glances down at her notes, then back up again, unsure whether to step in or stay out of it. The audience, moments ago relaxed and smiling, now sits frozen, caught between curiosity and discomfort. Whoopi leans back slightly, her expression composed, but her eyes sharper now. This is familiar territory for her. Decades on The View have taught her how to sit in tension, how to let it breathe. But Ben doesn't look like he wants it to breathe anymore. He exhales slowly, running a hand across his face, as if trying to ground himself. For a moment, it almost looks like he might pull back, like he might soften the edges of what he just said. But then he leans forward again. You know what's interesting? He says, his voice controlled, but carrying a quiet intensity. People always talk about narratives. Like everything we do has to fit into some clean, digestible story. Whoopi watches him carefully. That's the business you're in, she replies. Film, media, storytelling. You know that better than anyone. Ben nods once. Yeah, I do. There's a pause, brief but loaded. But there's a difference, he continues, between telling a story and surviving one. A murmur moves through the audience. It's subtle, but it's there. Whoopi's expression shifts, just slightly. Not defensive, but more attentive now. Ben's voice lowers, not in volume, but in tone. It's no longer about the show. It's not even about the question anymore. It's about something deeper. When I was working on Argo, he says, almost as if thinking out loud, everything looked perfect from the outside. Awards, recognition, people calling it a comeback. Like everything had been neatly fixed. He lets out a quiet breath. But that wasn't real. The room feels smaller somehow. Behind the scenes, he continues, I was still dealing with things I didn't understand. Pressure, expectations, trying to live up to something that people had already decided I was supposed to be again. Whoopi nods slowly. That's something a lot of people can relate to, she says, her tone softer now. But Ben shakes his head again, this time more firmly. Yeah, he says. But not everyone has millions of people watching every mistake you make. Not everyone has their worst moments turned into headlines. The audience shifts again. A few nod quietly. And when you finally decide to be honest about it, he adds, to actually say, hey, I'm not okay, suddenly it's a strategy? There's an edge there now. Sharper than before. Whoopi leans forward again, her hands resting calmly on the table. She doesn't interrupt immediately. She lets him finish, lets the weight of his words settle. Then she speaks. No one's saying your struggles aren't real, she says. But you have to understand the perspective from the outside. People see patterns. They see timing. They ask questions. Ben's eyes narrow slightly. Questions are fine, he says. Assumptions aren't. The words land clean. Direct. A co-host shifts in her seat, glancing briefly toward the producers. The tension is no longer subtle. It's visible now, cutting through the air. Whoopi tilts her head, her voice still calm, but firmer. And accountability? She asks. Where does that come in for you, Ben? Because part of being open is also owning how your actions affect other people. That hits something. You can see it instantly. Ben's posture stiffens, his expression tightening, not just with frustration, but with something more personal. I've owned my mistakes, he says, his voice rising just slightly, not enough to be shouting, but enough to shift the energy again. Publicly. Privately. More times than I can count. He pauses, his gaze locked on Whoopi. But what I'm not going to do is sit here and have those mistakes turned into some kind of performance review. A few audible reactions ripple through the audience now. A quiet wow from somewhere in the back. Someone exhales sharply. Whoopi doesn't flinch. This isn't a performance review, she replies. It's a conversation. No, Ben says quickly, almost cutting in. It stopped being just a conversation the moment you questioned the intent behind something that nearly cost me everything. Silence again. He doesn't look away this time. Neither does she. And for a moment, it feels like the entire room disappears. Like it's just the two of them, locked in this exchange that has gone far beyond what anyone expected when the show began. Whoopi takes a slow breath. I'm asking the questions people at home are thinking, she says. That's my job. And I'm answering them. Ben shoots back, honestly. That's mine. There's a beat. Then another. The tension doesn't break, it deepens. One of the co-hosts finally leans forward slightly, her voice cautious. Maybe we can. But she stops. Because Ben isn't finished. You want honesty? He says, his voice quieter now, but more intense than ever. Here's honesty. There were times I didn't think I'd make it through. Times when I wasn't sure I'd be here for my kids. For my career. For anything. The audience goes completely still again. No murmurs this time. No shifting. Just silence. And the only reason I talk about it now, he continues, is because pretending everything was fine almost destroyed me. So if that makes people uncomfortable, good. The word echoes. Good. Whoopi watches him closely, her expression unreadable now. There's no interruption. No quick response. Because this is no longer just debate. This is something raw. Something real. And yet the question still lingers between them. Perception versus intention. Public versus private. And just when it feels like the moment might finally settle, Whoopi leans forward one more time. Her voice is quieter now. Measured. But the weight of it is unmistakable. And what about the people who were affected along the way? She asks. The ones who didn't get to tell their side of that story? The air shifts again. Sharply. Because this time, it's not just about Ben anymore. And the look on his face. It changes. Not just frustration. Not just intensity. Something deeper. Something closer to anger. The kind that doesn't explode all at once. But builds. Slowly. Dangerously. And in that moment, everyone in the studio realizes the same thing. This conversation isn't cooling down. It's about to go even further. The question doesn't just land, it cuts. For a split second, it feels like the entire studio forgets how to breathe. The words hang heavy in the air, echoing louder than anything that's been said so far. Even the lights seem harsher now, casting sharper shadows across the table where Ben Affleck sits frozen and Whoopi Goldberg waits. Ben doesn't answer immediately. His eyes drop for a moment, not in defeat, but in restraint. His fingers interlock, tightening slightly, as if he's holding something back. The shift is visible. This isn't just frustration anymore. This is personal. A memory flickers across his expression, unspoken but present. Years in the spotlight. Relationships dissected in headlines. Mistakes magnified, replayed, judged. Names attached to stories that were never fully his to tell. When he finally looks up again, his voice is quieter. But heavier. You think I don't think about that? He says. No anger. Not yet. But there's something deeper in the tone, something that carries weight beyond the moment. Whoopi doesn't interrupt. She watches him carefully, her posture steady, her gaze fixed. This is the part of the conversation where most people either retreat or reveal more than they planned. Ben exhales slowly. Every decision I've made, he continues, every mistake, it didn't just affect me. I know that. The audience shifts, leaning in again. But this time, the energy is different. Less shock. More anticipation. But here's the thing, he adds, lifting his gaze fully now. There's a line. A line between accountability and turning real people, real situations, into talking points. The words land deliberately. Measured. Whoopi tilts her head slightly, her expression still composed, but more focused now. And where is that line for you? She asks. Because from the outside, it's not always clear. Ben lets out a quiet breath, almost a hollow laugh, but without humor. Of course it's not clear, he says, because people only see fragments. Headlines. Clips. They don't see the full picture, and honestly, they're not entitled to it. A ripple moves through the audience again, this time more audible. Whoopi's eyes narrow just slightly, not in disagreement, but in challenge. But when you choose to speak publicly, she says, you're opening that door, even if it's just a little. Ben leans forward again, slower this time. More deliberate. No, he says. I'm opening my door. Not anyone else's. That lands harder than anything before it. A co-host shifts sharply beside Whoopi, clearly feeling the tension spike again. The air feels tighter now, like something is on the edge of snapping. Whoopi holds his gaze. And what happens, she asks carefully, when your story overlaps with someone else's? There it is again. That edge. That pressure point. And this time, Ben doesn't hold back. What happens, he repeats, his voice firmer now, is that I do the best I can to be honest without dragging other people into something they didn't ask for. He pauses, his expression tightening. But that doesn't mean I stay silent about my own life just to keep everyone else comfortable. The audience reacts, some nodding, others whispering, the tension now openly dividing the room. Whoopi leans back slightly, folding her hands. She studies him for a moment longer than before. You say that, she replies, but silence and honesty aren't the only two options. There's also responsibility. That word again. Responsibility. Ben's reaction is immediate this time. His jaw tightens, his posture stiffening as if something has finally struck a nerve he can't ignore. You keep coming back to that, he says. Like I've been avoiding it. I'm asking about it, Whoopi corrects calmly. No, Ben says, shaking his head. You're implying something. The tension spikes again, sharper, louder, impossible to ignore now. And what do you think I'm implying? Whoopi asks, her tone steady but unmistakably firm. Ben leans in, closer than before. You're implying that I've somehow used my past, my struggles, as a way to control how people see me, he says. And that's not just wrong, it's insulting. A collective reaction ripples through the audience. Some gasp softly. Others sit frozen, eyes wide. Whoopi doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. I'm saying, she replies, that when you're in a position like yours, intention and impact don't always match. The words are calm, but they hit hard. Ben stares at her for a long moment, long enough that the silence starts to feel uncomfortable again. Then he nods. Once. Slowly. You're right, he says. The response catches everyone off guard. Even Whoopi. For a brief second, it feels like the tension might finally break. But it doesn't, because Ben isn't done. They don't always match, he continues, his voice steady but carrying a new intensity. And I've spent years dealing with the impact of things I didn't intend. His gaze sharpens again. But what I won't accept is someone else deciding my intention for me. There's a pause. A long one. The kind that stretches just enough to make everything feel uncertain again. Whoopi studies him closely. There's something different in her expression now. Not softer, not harder, just more aware. And what would you want people to understand? She asks finally. If you could control that narrative, just for a moment, what would you say? It's a different kind of question. Less confrontational. More direct. And for the first time since the conversation turned, Ben doesn't respond immediately. He leans back slightly, his eyes drifting. Not away from the conversation, but inward. Like he's searching for something real enough to cut through everything that's been said. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter. But it carries more weight than anything before it. I'd say, I'm still figuring it out, he admits. The audience stills again. I don't have some perfect answer, he continues. I don't wake up every day with everything solved. I make mistakes. I try to fix them. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. There's no edge now. No sharpness. Just honesty. But I show up, he adds. I keep trying. And yeah, sometimes that means talking about things that are uncomfortable. Not because it looks good, but because it's real. A quiet murmur spreads through the audience, this time softer, more reflective. Whoopi nods slowly. I can respect that, she says. And for a moment, it feels like the storm might pass, like the tension might finally settle into something calmer. But then, almost imperceptibly, Whoopi leans forward again. Not aggressively, not confrontationally, but with purpose. And do you think, she asks, her voice calm but pointed, that being real also means being ready to hear how that reality affects others? The question is quieter than the ones before it. But somehow, it hits even harder. Ben's expression shifts again. Not back to anger. Not fully. But something flickers there, something unresolved. Because this isn't just about defending himself anymore. It's about something deeper. something neither of them has fully let go of. The audience feels it. The co-hosts feel it. Even the crew behind the cameras feels it. This isn't over. Not even close. Because the conversation has moved beyond confrontation into something far more complicated. And as the cameras keep rolling on the view, one thing becomes painfully clear. The aftermath of this moment is going to be bigger than anything that's been said so far. For a moment, no one speaks. Not the audience. Not the co-hosts. Not even the producers behind the cameras. The silence inside the view feels heavier than anything that's been said. Like the room itself is trying to process what just unfolded between Ben Affleck and Whoopi Goldberg. Ben doesn't answer immediately. Whoopi's last question lingers in the air. Quiet, precise, impossible to ignore. Does being real also mean being ready to hear how that reality affects others? Ben leans back slowly, his hands resting on the table now, no longer clenched, but not relaxed either. His expression isn't defensive anymore. It's something more complicated. Something caught between reflection and resistance. He nods once. Slowly. Yeah, he says, his voice lower now. It does. The audience shifts subtly. Not shocked this time, but listening. But that doesn't mean, he continues, lifting his gaze again, that every version of that impact is fair. Or accurate. Whoopi studies him carefully, her expression calm but attentive. That's true, she says. But it doesn't make those perspectives disappear. Ben exhales, a faint, tired smile crossing his face, one that doesn't quite reach his eyes. No, he admits. It doesn't. There's a pause. And for the first time since the tension began, it feels like both of them are standing on the same ground. Not agreeing. Not fully understanding each other. But meeting somewhere in the middle. Ben glances down briefly, then back up, his voice steadier now, less reactive, more grounded. I've hurt people, he says plainly. That's part of my story. I'm not pretending otherwise. A quiet murmur spreads through the audience again, this time softer, almost empathetic. But I've also tried to grow, he adds. And growth doesn't always look clean. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. And yeah, sometimes it plays out in public whether you want it to or not. Whoopi nods slowly. That's something a lot of people forget, she says. They see the moment, not the process. Ben gives a slight nod in return. Exactly. The tension that once filled the room hasn't vanished, but it's changed. It's no longer sharp. Now it's reflective. Real. But then Whoopi does something subtle, something that shifts the moment one last time. She leans in, her voice softer than it's been this entire conversation. And maybe, she says, that's why people ask the questions. Not to tear you down, but to understand the process you're talking about. The words land differently. Not as a challenge, but as an opening. Ben holds her gaze for a long second. Then finally he nods again. Maybe, he says quietly. And just like that, the storm breaks. Not with an explosion, but with something quieter. Something more human. The audience exhales almost in unison, a wave of released tension moving through the room. A few people begin to clap, hesitantly at first, then stronger, more unified. Not for a victory, but for the moment itself. For the honesty. For the clash that didn't collapse into chaos, but transformed into something deeper. One of the co-hosts finally leans forward, smiling lightly, trying to ease the atmosphere. Well, I think that's one of the most real conversations we've had on this table. A few soft laughs ripple through the audience. Even Ben lets out a small breath of relief, leaning back slightly in his chair. Whoopi smiles, not broadly, but enough to signal something unspoken. Respect. The cameras slowly pull back, capturing the table, the audience, the studio, everything returning to its usual rhythm. But something has changed, because moments like this don't just end when the cameras stop. They echo, and within minutes of the segment airing, the reaction begins. Clips of the exchange start spreading across social media, short, intense snippets capturing the sharpest moments. Ben leaning forward, Whoopi holding her ground. The silence, the words. Hashtag Ben Affleck. Hashtag The View. Hashtag Whoopi Goldberg. The hashtags begin trending almost instantly. Some viewers side with Ben, calling his honesty raw, powerful, overdue. Others defend Whoopi, praising her for asking the hard questions, for refusing to let the conversation stay on the surface. Media outlets pick it up within hours. Ben Affleck gets candid in heated exchange on The View. Whoopi Goldberg challenges Affleck in tense on-air moment. Real talk or too far? Debate erupts after viral interview. panel discussions, reaction videos, comment sections flooding with opinions. Everyone has something to say, because it wasn't just a celebrity moment. It was something people recognized. Struggle, accountability, perception, growth, and somewhere in between all of that, a conversation that felt real. Backstage, the energy is quieter, less performative. Ben stands near the hallway, adjusting his jacket, the intensity of the moment still lingering, but softened now. A producer passes by, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. Powerful segment, they say. Ben just nods back. Not celebratory, not regretful, just thoughtful. Across the room, Whoopi speaks briefly with one of the crew members, her tone calm, her expression unchanged, but there's a subtle depth there now. The kind that comes from knowing a moment mattered. They don't speak again before he leaves. They don't need to, because everything that needed to be said was said on that stage. And as Ben walks out of the studio, past the lights, past the noise, past the world that's already reacting to what just happened, there's a sense that this wasn't just another interview. It was a moment, the kind that stays with people, the kind that sparks conversations long after the cameras stop rolling. And now, it's your turn. What do you think? Was Ben Affleck right to defend his truth so strongly? Or did Whoopi Goldberg ask the questions that needed to be asked? Drop your opinion in the comments below. And if you want more intense, cinematic, reality-inspired stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Talk Battles, hit the like button, and stay tuned, because the next story might be even more explosive. Fire!